The President, please be seated. The court is now in session. During this morning's session, the Chamber continues to hear the testimony of Mr. Suong Sikun. Questions continue to be put by Defense Counsel. And the eventual time left after this testimony of Mr. Suong Sikun, the Chamber is going to hear witness Saw Siek. Mr. Dujpari, you are now invited to report to the Chamber concerning the current presence of the parties to the proceedings. Dujpari, Mr. President, Your Honours, all parties to the proceedings are present except Mr. Son Arun, who is absent due to his health concern. Mr. Ieng Sary is in his holding cell downstairs. Through his counsels, Mr. Ieng Sary has waived his right to participate directly in the courtroom for the entire day today. His waiver has been submitted to the greffier of the trial chamber already. With regard to witness Saw Siek, she is in the waiting room awaiting call from the chamber. The President, thank you, Mr. Pari. Next, before we proceed to counsels for the accused, the Chamber would like to rule on two requests. First, the request by counsel for Mr. Ieng Sary. The Chamber has received a request by counsels for Mr. Ieng Sary on the 20th of August 2012, in which Mr. Ieng Sary has requested that he be excused from attending directly in the proceedings. Mr. Van Mik, the medical doctor who examined Mr. Ieng Sary, has observed that Mr. Ieng Sary is fatigued. He becomes tired when he moves, and he feels dizzy when walking. Due to that problem, Mr. Ieng Sary cannot stand up or remain seated for a long time, so he has recommended that Mr. Ieng Sary be allowed to observe the proceedings from the holding cell. The Chamber therefore grants such a request as recommended by the doctor. Mr. Ieng Sary is now permitted to observe the proceedings from the holding cell because he is mentally fit to observe the proceeding, although he is not physically well. Mr. Ieng Sary can now observe the proceedings from there. He can do so for the whole duration of the day proceedings, and AV booth officers are now instructed to ensure that the AV equipment is well connected to the room so that Mr. Ieng Sary can observe the proceeding from there. The second ruling is on the request to use document during the examination of the witness. The Chamber authorizes the Nuon Chea defense, if they wish to do so, to quote from document D366/7.1.564, but only if they have further questions to ask of the witness. They may not revisit topics which have already been canvassed, particularly where these questions were found to be irrelevant or repetitious. The motion to revisit documents D 22/185.5 and E3/1435 is denied. The full reasons for the decision will be placed on the case file in due course. Next, without further ado, the Chamber would like to hand over to counsel for Mr. Ieng Sary to proceed with the remaining questions.
Good morning, Mr. President. Good morning, Your Honors. Good morning to everyone in and around the courtroom. And good morning, sir. Let's pick up where we left off last Thursday. And just to refresh your memory, we were discussing part of your testimony from August 6th, 2012, and I'm referring to, this would be in English, page 64. Khmer is 00832181-82. French 00833134-35. In English, it's 00833251. And we touched on this a little bit. You provide an answer where you say that Mr. Ieng Sary was in charge of foreign affairs of the center, and as for the intellectuals arriving from France who were the former members of the Marxist-Leninist circle, he was also responsible for the group as well, and that included yourself. You then went on to say, or to clarify, what was meant by responsible and in charge, and you indicated Pol Pot. So Pol Pot also made the decision regarding the appointments for us, and that it was Mr. Ieng Sary who was actually directly responsible for carrying out your duties. Do you recall making those statements, sir?
Response. First of all, allow me to express my respect to the President and Your Honors. My answer is yes.
Thank you. Now, if we go over a page or so later, this would be in the transcript 66 in English, but the Khmer ERN is 00832183-84. French 00833137-38. In English 00833253-54. You then go on and you indicate that in certain cases, he, that is Pol Pot, was making a decision on his own discretion. For instance, in regard to the intellectual communists returning from France. And I knew that clearly because he knew them individually clearly, so he knew about their political stance. You then go on to say, and when it comes to making decisions regarding them, he would make them by himself. He would make it by himself on his. And then later on, you confirm that you are referring to Pol Pot. Do you recall saying that, and do you stand by this answer, sir?
Response. I may wish to also emphasize that I testified based on what I learned and what I knew. So far as I know, members who were the intellectuals in the Marxist-Leninist circle, they normally followed the instructions of the party inside the country, and their purpose was, after the liberation on the 17th of April 1975, willing to come to Cambodia to serve the country, because I already indicated that people who made the decision on the fate of intellectuals, including me, I'm referring these individuals to only the Marxist-Leninist circle, and these people known to Pol Pot very well, and our political stance was also clear and well recognized by Pol Pot. And these people respected and listened to the orders by the party. However, that doesn't mean that each individual of the group agree to all decisions made by the party. However, according to the principle of the party, lower-ranking officials had to obey the higher-ranking officials. For that reason, we were willing to contribute something to rebuilding the country and the party after the war.
Thank you, sir. I'm asking rather short questions just to confirm what you've said. Now let's talk about Pol Pot in light of your previous answers and the answers you've given us here today. And I want to refer to the 15th of August, 2012, your testimony, which can be found on page 18 in English. The Khmer is 13 to 14. It's the draft version. That's all we have. And the French is page 19. That's where I'll begin. When you are first asked about Philip Short and his book, Anatomy of a Nightmare, and then we see that at some point you are provided with a quote that is attributed to you, and that can be found on page 20 in English, 21 in French, where you talk about Pol Pot micromanaging. You indicate micromanaging the smallest detail was part of Pol Pot's conception of leadership, a firm hand with no sharing of power. He wanted to monopolize everything. Now, is that your firm conviction here today as well, that based on what you were able to observe at the time, Pol Pot micromanaged everything?
Response. Yes, it is. This is how he managed things. He was meticulous in his leadership. He left no room for others to intervene in his decision.
Thank you. Now, as an example, perhaps you can help us here and confirm whether this would be an example. I'm referring to E3/42, and in Khmer it's 00327206-07, French 00327226-27, and English 00327206-07. 327217. And this document is your statement of May 6, 2009. And you were asked a question, and I believe you even touched on it already, where you were asked, did you have any contact with Nuon Chea from 1975 to 79? And we see part of your answer is, I never had any contact with Nuon Chea from 75 to 79 because he was not dealing with the foreign policy. It was Pol Pot who took care of this. Would it be fair to say, do you stand by that it was Pol Pot who was taking care of the foreign policy at the time?
Response: yes, I do. It is obviously clear it was the principal of the party, as the party was the general commander, and as the secretary of the party, he monopolized all affairs, and he had enjoyed this automatic authority to manage the affairs of the party and things that are relevant to the CPK.
All right. Now, and then as another example, perhaps you could help us out here, is the so-called Black Book. Now, you've testified concerning this matter, and I'm referring to your testimony of August 6th, where you indicated that it was Pol Pot who actually was responsible for the drafting of the Black Book, that those were his ideas. Do you recall telling us that?
Response: yes, I do. I did testify before the chamber like that. He called some cadres to meet up with him, and at that time Mr. Ieng Sary was present. And then he gave presentation, and we took notes. And at the end of the session, we returned to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. At that time, I myself was, along with Mr. Kiet Chun and Jun Prasad and Nikon and Mrs. So Sai and other cadres, not all from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, who were there. And we then carry out what presented in his presentation. We drafted the document and presented it to him. He later on sent the document back to us, to our propaganda section at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, so that it could be translated into 3 languages, Khmer, French, and English. And we had no rights to amend what could have been the content of his presentation. We only made some revision of the wordings.
Thank you, sir. And for the record, we can find your previous testimony on this matter on pages 79 to 80 in English. The Khmer numbers would be 00832192 to 94, French 00833 151 to 57, and English it would be 00833266 to 67. Now, would that be an example of micromanaging, in the sense of how you conveyed it to Philip Short?
Response. I already stated this micromanagement, what Pol Pot did, but only some of the points. But I would like to also state further that in 1976, during the trip or the visit of the Foreign Minister of Thailand, Mr. Pichai Rothakun, at that time, the relation between the CPK and Thailand was not well established. We did not exchange our ambassadors. So the Thai representative came to visit in Sisopon location. At that time, I was also present during the visit, and Pol Pot sent us soap, towels, and some shoes or slippers for the visitors. And Mr. Anand Pancharachun was also represent Thailand when he was at the Foreign Ministry of Thailand.
Thank you. And we're going to touch upon that meeting in a second. Now, I want to refer to your statement of 12th March 2009, in line of what you just told us, that is, and this would be E3371, and in particular, I'm referring to, it would be page 2 in English, but the Khmer ERN number is 00288234 to 35, French 00288241 to 42, and English 00290413 all the way to 16. Yes. Here you say, you give an answer. Democratic Cambodia was a communist country, and so it was the party that decided everything, even on foreign affair matters. This policy was defined by the leader of the party, Pol Pot, and my own destiny depended on him. Pol Pot nominated me to the ministry, and he also appointed me to the Cambodia Information Agency. Now, if we just stop here, considering what you just told us, is it the party as a collective that is setting the foreign policy, or is it Pol Pot who's actually in charge of setting the foreign policy, dictating what it is?
Response. As a normal member of the party below the CPK, I am not able to know the decision made collectively based on the democratic centralism and based on the party's policy. However, whatever decision made by the party, normally, as the secretary of the party, he shall be responsible for all the decisions made by the party to be implemented by members of the party.
All right. Well, let's go back to the Black Book. From what you witnessed and from what you told us, Pol Pot directed it, dictated it, approved it, and no one was able to edit it. From what you were able to see, was it the party that drafted the Black Book, or was it Pol Pot, he and he alone?
The President, witness, could you please hold on? Co-prosecutor, you may now proceed.
Bonjour, Monsieur.
Good morning, Mr. President, Your Honors. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, witness. This question has already been put previously by Counsel Carnavas, and he's putting the question again because he just received an answer that may not concur with what he wishes, but there's no reason to put the same question to the witness again.
Well, Mr. President, we receive one answer with respect to an example, and then we receive another answer. And there seems to be an inherent contradiction. Part of the process is to try to see whether we can bring some clarity to these contradictions. So I leave it to you, Mr. President, whether to proceed with this line or to move on.
The President, the objection is grounded and therefore sustained as the question itself was repetitious. Witness is now instructed not to respond to the question. The Chamber would like to remind Counsel that you should ensure that the remaining questions are not repetitive.
Thank you for the reminder, Mr. President. If we could go to the next page on the same document, you indicate, you're asked a question about Mr. Ingsari, and then you say, that is correct. It is also true that he chaired the CPK Central Committee Commission on Foreign Affairs. But I do not know about those activities. What I would like to add, that in communist countries, it is normal that certain institutions are only fronts and have no members apart from the chairman. This was the case for the Commission on Foreign Affairs, which was composed solely by Ieng Sary, who reported directly to Pol Pot. Do you see that part of your answer, sir?
Yes. That's what I said.
And when you say that this was common in communist countries to have fronts, in other words, fictitious commissions and committees and institutions, can you please tell us who would have been responsible for creating these fronts? Because you go on to say, at least in this instance, that Ieng Sary reported directly to Pol Pot.
ខ្ញុំ that I am not certain about who established it, but for my personal observation, that was the usual appointment where Pol Pot was the secretary of the party, and in foreign affairs domain, Ieng Sary was in charge, and down below him included me and other cadres working for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs were the implementing agents. We were the implementers, we were not the decision makers.
Thank you, but we were talking and discussing your answer about this front that was established, the Central Commission on Foreign Affairs. And you said that this was a front. Do you know who established this front? Who tried to create this fiction of a commission that reported, that had Ieng Sary as chairman, reporting directly to Pol Pot? If you know, fine. If you don't know, just say so and I'll move on.
The specific details of the appointment was not known to me, but in the democratic Cambodia, like other socialist country as well, it was under the decision and direction of the standing committee. In certain countries like China or Vietnam, they have Politburo, and in that Politburo there is a political committee comprising of a small core numbers to lead important activities. And in the central committee of the party, there were sub-committees as well. For example, a subcommittee for economy, for foreign affairs, and for commerce, and things like that. And I did not know the specific appointment, but it was, I think, a usual designation and appointments of working groups to handle the task. But I would also like to add that the Commission on Foreign Affairs, as far as I knew, that Ieng Sary chaired this commission, and as for members of this commission, I did not know who was part of this commission, and I did not know the roles they play either.
Fine, sir, but I guess I'm going to stick with this a little bit, because now you're telling us something different. In your statement, you're saying that it was a fiction. It was a front. There were no other members, only Mr. Ieng Sary. Now you're telling us that you didn't know who the other members were. Back then, 75 to 79, did you actually know of this commission? And did you actually know how it operated, if it operated at all? Because you are characterizing it as a front. If you don't know, please say so, and please do not speculate.
I do not know whether or not the Defense Council understood the appointment of working groups in communist countries. Normally in the countries which was led by communist government.
I'm going to cut off the witness. Is not responsive to my question, and he's eating up my time. I asked him for a direct answer. Now, if the gentleman doesn't know, he can say so, but he's not here to give speeches. It's non-responsive to my question.
The President. Witness is directed to respond to the question asked. And I have already advised you in the course of these proceedings that you should answer to the question. And if you do not know, then you can say so. You do not have to add any additional responses. Otherwise, it will add additional burden to you, and you may be exhausted as well in responding to those questions. Once again, the Chamber wishes to remind the parties that the questions were mostly repetitive. So I would like to once again remind the Council to avoid a repetitious question and also the question that impugn the witness. And please try to also avoid any questions that is out of the scope of the current proceedings. In the interest of time for the Chamber, we would like to once again urge party to reframe that question so that they are conducive to ascertaining the truth and they make good use of court time. The representative from the prosecution, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am sorry I have to intervene again. The defense is asking questions solely with regard to the External Commission's committee. The witness has mentioned in document the reference is read too fast by counsel, and the witness has said that the decision was taken in those commissions. The question asked by the defense is likely to mislead the witness because counsel doesn't take into account what the witness said regarding the importance of the External Relations Commission, E3/E77, page 7 in French.
And now we're having the prosecutor try.
Okay. The President, let the prosecution complete his statement first. Prosecutor, you may continue. Let the prosecution finishes his statement first. You may proceed, Mr. Prosecutor. The prosecutor, you may continue now.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Mr. President, the quotation of the witness is as follows regarding the Foreign Affairs Commission. It was in charge of relations between different parties. It therefore had a very important role in relations with communist countries. What the witness said is at variance with what was said in other statements. So the defense counsel should also refer to the other quotation in order for the witness to properly answer his question. Thank you, Mr. President.
This is rich coming from the prosecution. They routinely do this all the time, and then they say you can cover it on when you examine. This is what happens, Mr. President, when you delegate your authority to the prosecution to go ahead with initialing the questioning and turning them into this an adversarial proceeding. That's what you've done, because they ask their questions that are for their case. They're not asking the questions that you would ask, exhausting for both sides, and then allowing the parties to supplement. I'm entitled to conduct my examination based on their examination and based on the answers of the witness. I do not have to follow their script. If they wish to question the witness thereafter as a rebuttal, then we can introduce that system as well. But this is the problem. You've turned this into an adversarial proceedings. This is no longer a civil law land proceeding. It is an adversarial proceeding. The prosecution puts on its case. they show its documents. They question the witness based on selective portions. And when I've objected in the past, and I've said, why haven't they asked other passages? The answer is, you can do that when it's your turn. That's the problem. And I'm entitled to ask questions concerning this statement and to ask for clarification based on the answers that the witness gave today. Nobody's trying to mislead the gentleman. I'm simply asking him, who established this front? That was the thrust of my question. Not how appointments were made. Who established it? If he knows, fine. If he doesn't know, I'll move on.
President, witness, you are now instructed to respond to the question. I was about to respond to that question, but since the council intervened, then it lost some time for me to answer the question. I did not know in response to that question, but as far as I knew at that time, there was only one person who chaired the commission, but as for the detailed appointment of the composition of this commission, I did not know.
Thank you. Now, concerning this black book, was it ever circulated around after it was published, in country that is? And if so, in which languages?
As for our department, we knew that the black book was circulated overseas as well. But internally in Cambodia, I did not know whether they circulated this to them or not, because it was not under my responsibility.
Thank you. And the reason I'm asking is On Tong Hong, in his testimony on August 9th, has indicated that Ho Nam Hong and Pek Bun Tong, while at Bong Trebek, spent almost an entire day trying to translate this book into Khmer. So I take it, based on your answer, you don't know how they would have gotten a hold of it in French in order to translate it into Khmer.
No, I do not really understand the question, because the book was originally in Khmer, and why need to translate it back into Khmer? Because Khmer was the original language of the book.
Thank you. That was why I was asking, because it seemed rather curious. But thank you. Now, if we move on to the next topic, and I want to go back to a line of questioning, but I didn't get a full answer. You had indicated in your statement, and I'm referring to E3/372, and in particular, Khmer 0029042 0 to 21, French 0029431 to 32, and English 0029026. You indicate here that in your answer, yes, in principle, but in practice, since Pol Pot's nephew was the head of the, quote, office, unquote, the former could decide whatever he wanted without consulting Ieng Sary. And it was the same for the diplomats section. and then you give an example, and then you say, on 31 December 1977, the decision was taken to sever diplomatic relations with Vietnam. Normally, this declaration should have been done by my department, but I was presented with a finished text. Ki Chun and Hugh Perseth had been asked to write the declaration under the direction of Pol Pot. I want to focus a little bit on So Hong. It's obviously from your answer, it would appear that at the time you knew that he was Pol Pot's nephew. It wasn't something that you learned after 79. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. At that time, I knew him as the nephew of Pol Pot.
In light of his relations with Pol Pot, and given the answer that you've given us, was any deference given to So Hong because of who he was related to?
As far as I know, the relationship or biological relationship did not have any influence or impacts on the leadership and management during the Democratic Cambodia. So I think there was no special treatment for So Hong on the ground that he was related to Pol Pot, but of course So Hong was the Secretary General of Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and he was also in charge of line departments under the ministry, and certain matters he did not have to seek approval from Ieng Sary. For example, the decision handed down by Pol Pot went through So Hong. He did not have to seek approval from Ieng Sary. So Pol Pot may directly ordered through So Hong. But this was my observation, the observation of the working procedures and leadership style at that time.
All right. Thank you. Now, I just want to, since we're on So Hong for a second, maybe clarify one matter. And this concerns Koi Toon's confession. There seems to be a contradiction or a conflict between your testimony and that of So Hong's. He indicates that it was you that handed him Koi Toon's confession. And that can be found, Your Honors, in E3/413. And in particular, it can be found on Khmer 00357530-31, English 00361014, and French 00405456. And you've told us back on August 7 that it was So Hong that actually handed you Koi Toon's confession, and this is on Khmer 00832518, French 00833626, and English 00833510. And so my question, sir, is who's right and who is wrong? Did you hand So Hong Koi Toon's confession, or did So Hong hand you Koi Toon's confession? And this would have been, I believe, January 6, 1979.
On the morning of the 7th of January 1979, when I was about to leave B1 to the Ministry of Propaganda, at that time it has the code name of K33. At that time, So Hong handed in the confession of Koi Toon to me, and he told me that we would meet in the next 5 days. So my understanding at that time, I did not know whether or not he was serious about that. And I actually did not receive any confessions from anyone myself, so I could never hand in this confession to So Hong. It would be virtually impossible for me to hand in this confession to So Hong.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. Now, if we go on to another topic, still we're talking about Pol Pot. And you've indicated to us in the past that he made decisions and he made appointments, and in particular, he was the one that was involved with the intellectuals returning from the country. Now, I have a question for you based on what Chandler writes, and perhaps you can assist us here. Here you, Mr. Chandler, and I'm referring to D108/50/1.75. The English ERN number is 00193374. There's been no translation, but this is the same passage that was shown to another witness. Let me read it very briefly. It's just a short passage. It says, this is with respect to On Tong Hong, the section that he was writing about him. It says, Hong was affiliated with the UEK rather than the more extreme Union Nationale des Étudiants Khmer, ENEK, the Maoist organization to which Kol Tuk Sun belonged. And this is the part that I'm interested in. Some 30 members of the UNEK, including Tuk's son, were allowed back into Cambodia in 1973 after being vetted by Cambodians in Beijing. Students like Hong, who were affiliated with the UEK, were told to wait, and none returned home until after April 1975. Now, you've told us that you were in Beijing at or around this time. Can you add some clarity on this? Does David Chandler have it right that as early as 1973, a vetting process was going on at the Beijing embassy as to which Cambodians would be returning to join in the revolution?
at the time, there were many students, including Kol Dorothy, who was the son of Kol Tuj. He was there in Peking to prepare himself to return to join the revolution in Cambodia. They were there under training, physical training to strengthen their physical strength when they had to endure difficulties when they are involved in the revolution. So they had to endure all of those hardships before they came.
Right, but my question goes to the vetting itself. Who could return and who could not? Mr. Chandler seems to, well, he's indicating that there was a vetting process, a selection process being carried out from the Beijing embassy. Is he correct in that?
So, do you believe David Chandler or do you believe me? Because I was there myself. I was a student among those students in Peking. There was no selection process whatsoever. Those who requested to be returned to Cambodia, they came. They decided to return to Cambodia on voluntary basis.
Okay, this is as early as 1973 we're speaking about.
It was in 1973.
All right. And now at some point, you've told us, and this would have been on your testimony of August 6th, and I'm referring to Khmer 008321992200, French 00833160262, English 00833273-74. You've said that the secretary that was attached to the embassy had the real authority. Do you recall telling us that?
Response. Yes, that's the organizational structure of the party. So who was the secretary of the party had the authority to lead, not the ambassador.
All right. Now I want to go to E3/101. This is your statement of 17 March 2009. And perhaps you can add some clarity in light of the last two answers that you've given us about David Chandler and this last one, the secretary at the embassies. You're asked a question, how was the ER number is, well, I'm referring to the document E3/101. ER number is 00290437-38. That's the Khmer. French 00290449. And then the English 00290443. And here you indicate everyone went through the Cambodian embassy in Beijing. Since communications between the embassy and Phnom Penh went through two different channels, the party channel and the government channel, it is possible that instructions were given to the party cell directly by Pol Pot. Do you see that part of your answer, sir?
Response. Yes, I do.
Now, the period that you're referring to here, would that be post-75, or would that also include pre-1975?
The President. Mr. President, before 1975, the CPK was not yet in power. I do not know how this question was put in the first place by Council. The President, you may refer to two dates. The first question was about 1973, but the next question is about the new date, and it is appropriate to put that question. So please listen carefully to the question and respond accordingly.
Do you know, sir, whether any instructions were provided by Pol Pot to the party cell in Beijing, even prior to 1975, concerning the return of intellectuals?
Response. Prior to 1975, Cambodia embassies were the embassies of the Funk and the Grunk, chaired by the then Prince Norodom Sihanouk, and this had nothing to do with the CPK, because the CPK only ruled the country from the 17th of April 1975 only.
Thank you. One final question on this matter. Was there a party cell in Beijing prior to 75?
Response. Yes, it was. There was a party cell in Beijing chaired by Mrs. Xiang An, who was the secretary of the party.
And did she remain secretary of the party after 75?
Response. No, in 1975 she came, so far as I remember, back to the country and no longer be the secretary. She was not the secretary at the embassy, but for the party, but no longer be in the position after that.
And do you know who made the decision to replace her? Or did she voluntarily come back?
Response. I do not know about this, but I know that her husband was the ambassador to Hanoi for the Grunk. So it was possible that she returned to Hanoi to reunite with her husband.
Thank you. Now I want to move to another topic, again, somewhat related to what we've been talking about, that is Pol Pot. You were asked a series of questions concerning the base cadre transiting through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and also a reference was made to a Khe Kim Hut. Now, I want to ask you a question concerning this. You state in your testimony on August 7th, and this would be Khmer 00832525 to 26, French 00833639, and English 00833521 to 22. You state that, among other things, Mr. Ieng Sary was like an administrator who will be supervising the work of them, but the decision of the appointment was up to Pol Pot. As to who were to be sent to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs was to be decided by Pol Pot. The detail about some protocols of diplomats when they are attached overseas, for example, the presentation of credentials to the country with which he is attached. Do you recall making that statement, sir, here in court?
Response. The base cadres who had to go to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs were not under the supervision of Mr. Ieng Sary because they were the base cadres. They were under supervision of the standing committee, obviously, and with regard to any appointment of any of these people would have been done by the standing committee, not Mr. Ieng Sary. And however, if they would like to be sent elsewhere, then they would be transiting at B1. And I remember giving a radio to each and individual cadre who was in Phnom Penh, and before they returned or came to Phnom Penh, they were at the base and they met me in my office, because my office was close to the staircase, and the people who came to the building would go through my office. So I can say that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs was the transit point. It's not the place where decision was made.
Thank you. Well, going back to your answer, and then we will refer to one of your statements. You say here that the decision was made by Pol Pot. You don't say anything about a standing committee here. This is my first point. This is what you testified on August 7th. And now if you look at E3/42, this is your statement of May 6, 2009. And I'm referring to Khmer 00327207 to 09, French 00327227 to 28, or I should say to 29, and 00327218 to 19. Here you're asked about to comment on a passage that was made from your ex-wife's book. And you say here that you have the answer in my manuscript under the title "The Minister des Affaires Étrangères Antechamber de la Mort," the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Antechamber of Death, ? Page 154. What can I say is that the cadre that Lawrence Peake mentioned in her book were a regional cadre who had problems in their region. They had been called to represent democratic Kampuchea abroad. They received diplomatic training at the Foreign Affairs Ministry, but the decision to call them to Phnom Penh and name them as ambassadors was not taken by the Foreign Affairs Ministry. It was an Office 870 decision, i.e., Pol Pot's decision. This is a common characteristic of communist regimes. And then you go on to talk about Kea Kim Hut. So here, sir, it appears that you are saying that it was Pol Pot's decision. Do you stand by what you told the investigators on 6 May, which is apparently what you wrote in your book that has been published?
Response. I wish to emphasize that those cadres were base cadres and were not under the supervision of Mr. Ieng Sary. For that reason, there was no other people other than Pol Pot, because if Ieng Sary did not manage or supervise them, it was Pol Pot who made the decision. Pol Pot called them to the ministry, and any one of them would be appointed to be an ambassador to any country according to the sole decision by Pol Pot. And to answer your question, yes, I do stand by that position.
Thank you. And would that answer also apply to Mr. Kea Kim Hut?
Response. Yes, it does. In the book,
Return to Caesar what belongs to Caesar.
that book is in French, and this means that anyone who does anything, he or she shall be responsible for his act or her action. It means that the hair grows on the person's head. I mean, he is the one who is responsible for that.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, I want to turn to a document that was shown to you by my colleague for the Nunchia team, and I'm going to be asking you a series of questions, albeit with a different focus on them, and I'm referring to document D199/26.2.80. And this seems to be a telegram. And this refers to a visit to Cambodia by the Thai Minister of Foreign Affairs, Khmer personalities. It's only 2 pages long, so I'll be referring to the second page. And, of course, you were quoted, or it was read to you from this document, a passage, and we can find it. And we can find it on the transcript, Khmer page 18 to 19, French 24 to 25, English is 23, and it's the passage from the second page of this 2-page document. I can read the ERN numbers if it's necessary. But this is what was read to you. Mr. Pol Pot appeared capable, resolute, and confident. He spoke in the first person. He obviously wanted to impress upon everyone that he is the man who has been running the country since 1975. He also took credit for the policy of friendship with Thailand, saying that he was the one who made the decisions to send Mr. Ieng Sary to Bangkok in October 1975. By contrast, Mr. Ieng Sary cut the figure of a lowly, respectful subordinate. He hardly answered any questions immediately. He seemed anxious to always consult a higher or collegial authority each time. In the course of the discussions, Mr. Ieng Sary also relied on Mr. Thun Prasit and Mr. Kit Chun, 2 seasoned senior officials whose function within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs were not specified. Now, we know from your testimony that you were not present. You did not attend the actual meeting itself, so you may not have been able to witness what is being described. But you have indicated that you worked for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs from 75 to 79. You've told us that you know Mr. Ieng Sary as well as Mr. Pol Pot. And my question is, in any other meetings that you might have been present, did Pol Pot give the appearance of being a capable, resolute, and confident individual who was running Cambodia at the time?
The response, so far as I know him, he is not the person who is too proud of himself individually or personally. However, as the secretary of the party, everyone respected him, and we agreed to his leadership. So I do not know during the meeting when we received the Thai foreign minister whether there was his present. At that time, he was the first prime minister, or rather, the first minister who was assigned to receive visiting foreign minister from other country. It was part of the appointment.
question is, in other meetings, did you witness Pol Pot in the manner in which he's described here? That's the thrust of my question, because you've told us you weren't at the meeting. So anything about the meeting itself, you may be speculating.
The President, witness, could you please hold on, Mr. Co-Prosecutor? You may now proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. I believe the witness already answered this question, so the question is repetitive. I could have objected earlier because it seems that we're leading the witness to draw certain conclusions. And maybe the question is not sufficiently precise because we don't know what kind of meeting the defense is referring to, and if Ieng Sary was present or whatever. Well, in any case, I think that basically speaking, this question has already been answered by the witness. Therefore, this question is repetitive. Thank you.
Mr. President, I asked him if he witnessed other such meetings. The answer could be yes or no. If yes, he appeared this way, or he didn't appear that way. There's nothing repetitive, but I'll move on for the sake of moving on. Now, you talked about knowing Pol Pot very well. You told us this on August 16, that you personally knew him very well and that you were not afraid of him. And this can be found in the transcript on page 24 to 25 in the Khmer version, French 32 to 33, and English, page 30. And then you indicate that I only learned of what happened during the regime only after 1979. And even if I were to know what happened during the regime, maybe I would not dare to refuse that offer. This was in respect to you meeting with Pol Pot when he offered you a particular position. Now, in the context of your answer, I want to clarify a couple of points. On August 8, 2012, you've told us, and this can be found on Khmer 00834205, French 00834407, English 00834298. You said, while I was in Beijing, I could never imagine that Pol Pot, whose original name was Solosar, was actually the secretary of the party. We all thought that Khieu Samphan or Ieng Sary was the party secretary. But he never thought that it was Pol Pot. So I cannot say for sure and respond completely to your question. Now, and so my question is, how is it that you are very much involved in party politics and party affairs from your days in Paris and then your activities in Beijing? You know Pol Pot very well. At least that's what you've told us. Perhaps not as well at that point in time. But how is it that you could never imagine that it was Pol Pot himself that was the secretary of the very same party that you were a member of? How could that be?
Response. It is not difficult to understand. I was the secret member in Cambodia before I went to France in October 1957. I was inducted by Mr. Ieng Sary When I was in France, the Leninist circle chaired by Mr. Kyusampan was in place, and I knew Pol Pot in 1956 when I was the teacher at the Jamran Vichia school. He was teaching French literature, and I was teaching geography and history, and I did not I knew that Pol Pot was handsome and a very polite and friendly person. So nobody could imagine that he could become the secretary of the party. Nobody could ever imagine that. And I knew him to be Salazar when he paid a visit to China in September 1977. At that time we knew that Pol Pot was actually Salazar.
Thank you. And may I ask if you recall, when did it dawn on you? When did you learn that he was actually the party secretary? Do you recall the year?
Response. It was in Peking when I joined as member of the CPK.
Okay, what year are we speaking of?
Response. It was in 1971.
And is that when you learned that it was Salazar that was the secretary, or is that when you learned that an individual by the name of Pol Pot was the secretary?
Response. That was the time when I learned that he was Salazar.
Okay, thank you. Now, I want to refer to your statement of May 7, 2009, and perhaps tied in with the last question, because you've indicated that you could never imagine that Pol Pot would have been was the party secretary. And I'm referring to E3/377, Khmer 0032735 to 38, French 00327255 to 57, and English 00327246 to 47. You were asked a question about the relations between Pol Pot and Ieng Sary. And part of your answer is, Pol Pot and Ieng Sary had very different personalities and evolved in very different ways. Indeed, fundamentally, Pol Pot wasn't a, quote, revolutionary, unquote. He had been educated in the royal palace. During his stay in Paris, he enjoyed having fun. Thereafter, he didn't accept any contradiction. For him, a man's life was less valuable than, quote, drop of water in the ocean, end of quote. On the contrary, Ieng Sary saved many people. He always asked us to tell him the truth, even if it was unpleasant. He had come to communism very early. In summary, I don't especially want to defend Ieng Sary, but I know him very well. And I can say that without the Pailan and Malay revolts in the 1990s, there would still be war. Now, in the context of what you told us, that you were surprised about Pol Pot, well, this might be one of the reasons, because Pol Pot, at least when you knew him as Solosar in Paris, was not a revolutionary, and he certainly came from what would appear a bourgeois background.
This was obviously the evolution, or historical evolution. Those who had the means and capability to become the party leader included Mr. Ratsamun. I did not know him personally. I only heard about him from his friends, and also from my friends who had acquainted with him. He had the necessary qualification and experience. For example, he was mature, he was...
Speaking about Pol Pot, my apologies for interrupting, but we're speaking about Pol Pot. Let me go on to the next question that I have within this answer of yours. When you say, thereafter, meaning Pol Pot, he didn't accept any contradictions. For him, a man's life was less valuable than a drop of water in the ocean. Now, when you say he did not accept any contradictions, what do you mean by that?
To my knowledge, any ideas that were contradictory to his was viewed by him that people did not cling to the party's position. At times he did not object or express any disapproval through his expression, but he maintained calmness and maturity. But following the victory of 1975, he became convinced that his position ever since was correct. That's why he did not believe in any contradiction at all. Any ideas that were contradictory to him was not accepted by him. And this led to the crimes of this massive scale. And to my understanding, the determination of the party lines at that time to transform Cambodia into a socialist country was done in a swift manner, and it was solely relying upon one person. That's why it led to this disaster and tragedy. That was my judgment. I know that he was not a person who liked to womanize or other things, but I myself believe that it was his personal opinion. I did not say that he considers human life or a man's life as a drop of water, but that was probably the situation at that time. The President, the time is now appropriate for adjournment. We will adjourn now and resume at 5 to 11. Court officer is instructed to coordinate and facilitate the venue for the witness and his duty counsel to rest during the break and bring them back by 5 to 11.